Hello students, it's Mr. Wilson here to talk to you about your biography video. The first thing we should have done already is gone over the biography video pre-production sheet that you're going to have to fill out eventually that has all the information and requirements about the production, and also the biography checkpoint list. So we should have already gone over this in class. You have an idea of the work that you have to do, the checkpoints that you have to meet, and the end product that you will eventually come out with. But the first item on your checkpoints list is to brainstorm at least 5 potential subjects for your video. And you could come up with this on your own, but I think when young people try to think of famous historically significant people, they're going to come up with the same types of names over and over, names that we've already known and heard of. So I don't really want you to come up with names that we know. Most of us already know. Martin Luther King is one of my biggest heroes, but I don't want you to make a video about him because most of us know pretty much all about him. Same thing with George Washington or Ben Franklin. We know these people, we know their stories, so we want some names that we haven't heard before. How do you do that? Well, I've had before suggested to students that they talk to their fathers, mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, teachers. Older people can give you ideas. You might have some ideas, and that's great, but another thing you could do is actually do a little bit of research online. So that's what we're going to do here. And the first thing I did, I'm going to actually go through each of the steps myself and come out with a finished product to show you how to do it, is I went and just Googled historically significant people. And I got a good website right here. The BBC History Channel, and they have a whole bunch of different historical people. Now, Napoleon Bonaparte, I think most of us probably know his story, maybe not, but I don't know. I think most of us will know that person pretty well. If you don't now, you'll know him pretty soon. Florence Nightingale, again, that's kind of iffy. I'd accept Florence Nightingale because I think probably most people don't know her real complete story. Martin Luther King, like I said, too well known. William Shakespeare, too well known. We know all about these people. These are just on the cover. But here is a alphabetical list, and if we go to C, just randomly, I can look at all these names, and myself, you should pick someone who's interesting to you, obviously, because you're going to be spending a lot of time researching this person, talking about this person, writing about this person, finding images about this person. Well, I really am interested in literature, so I know who Geoffrey Chaucer is. Probably most of you don't, but he's a very, very famous author from the 14th century. Wrote very famous work called the Canterbury Tales. So if I click on that, it's going to take me to some information about him. Okay, that looks good. So if I didn't know about him, I'd read this and go, yeah, I like that. So what Mr. Wilson's asked for is 5 names. You don't have to do it on a word processor. A lot of times I will ask you to do work on a word processor. For this, you don't have to. It's neater, though. It's nice. So here I go. 5 names of historically significant people. I've got my heading up here. Name, date, subject, period, teacher name, and Geoffrey Chaucer. And then I'm going to, in a complete sentence, or in not just a couple words, tell what this person did that makes him historically significant. So he was the first great poet who wrote in the English language. Most famous work is the Canterbury Tales. Okay, good. So that's one person. But like I said also, remember, if you want your work to be shown on Wake Up Tacoma, maybe you should choose a non-white guy, because there's no White Guy History Month. Geoffrey Chaucer is a white guy, so there's no time when I'd be able to play a Geoffrey Chaucer biography on Wake Up Tacoma. You could do him if you're interested in doing a biography on him. Go for it. He'd be a pretty interesting subject, I think. But if you want it played on Wake Up Tacoma, I wouldn't play that. So remember, the other types of people you could choose are women for Women's History Month, African Americans for African American History Month, Latinos, Native American Indians. So I found a bunch of different other places. Here's women in history. So I looked through here and found Maria Mitchell. She was the first woman elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, and the American Philosophical Society. She was a professor of astronomy at Vassar College. That might not sound that impressive unless you realize she did it in the early 1800s. So that's pretty impressive because back then women, didn't have quite as much acceptance in education, especially. So that's a pretty famous woman that I thought would be pretty interesting. I found this site, famous African American women. So these were pretty easy sites to find. I just Googled historically significant women, historically significant African American women, historically significant African Americans, and when I look at these, there are a whole bunch of great potential subjects. But the person who kind of just jumped out at me was someone named Hallie Quinn Brown, who was an educator, lecturer, clubwoman, reformer, and a fighter for civil rights, women's rights, and temperance, which was the fight against alcohol. So I thought that was an interesting person, so I put her down. And then this one was harder to find. When I did historically significant Native Americans, I didn't get many good places. So I actually had to change my Google search, which is something else we're going to talk about. If you don't find a good site or resource or image on your first Google search, change your words around. Use different words. You need to be able to kind of say, okay, let me try something different. So I think I tried a bunch of different things to find one. I ended up using important American Indian leaders to find this. And this site has a pretty good list of lots of Native American leaders, chiefs, and other types of leaders. And at the end, it's got a really good one, top 10 most famous American Indians in history. And even though these are the top 10, I'll tell you, I think any of these would be great to do as a biography because most people don't know much about these people. So Hiawatha, Blackhawk, Sitting Bull, Pocahontas, yeah, people know about her, but mostly just the Disney version, so you could do that. That would be great. Crazy Horse, Red Cloud, Geronimo, Pontiac, Sacagawea, and Will Rogers. So any of those would be great. So I decided Crazy Horse because I really like Crazy Horse. So I put all my 5 people and a little bit about what they do, and that's what I'm submitting. So that's my first step, and now I need to decide which one of those I want to do. And I'm going to turn that into Mr. Wilson for credit. It's just a homework grade at this point, but it's really important that I'm thinking about it. All of these, to me, sound pretty interesting. So that's one way you can do it. You can do some research online. Besides just asking some older people who might be able to give you some names, you might be able to get some names also. You could also use a regular book. You could go to the Media Center and ask for help there here at school. Lots of ways you could do it, but you could also use some online resources. So I'd save this document as 5 names of historically significant people, or 5 names, whatever. I could just put 5 names, and I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to put that on my flash drive, and I'm going to bring it into school, or maybe I'll print it out and give it to Mr. Wilson when it's due next class. Okay, so that's how you do it, and I'll see you for the next tutorial.